Hey everybody, welcome to another deep dive, this time into the world of free speech and freedom of religion.
Two big topics.
Yeah, absolutely huge, and we'll try to tackle both of them today.
Ambitious.
Yeah, but we are ambitious, what can I say? And we're going to be looking at how a modern organization called NEXUS-IBA is keeping these ideas alive, and get this.
Okay.
There's some fascinating echoes of ancient Greece in their work.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's really cool.
I'm intrigued already.
So we've got a whole stack of sources here about NEXUS-IBA, and we'll be looking at some of their platforms like IPA.
IPA.
That's International Public Access Radio, and EGR, European Gospel Radio, and even some writings about ancient Greek philosopher Socrates.
Oh, wow, going way back.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but how do we get from, this ancient philosopher to this modern media organization?
Well, that's a good question.
What's the connection?
Well, the thing they have in common is this dedication to open dialogue and giving a platform to a whole bunch of different voices and perspectives. Socrates believed that truth comes out through rigorous questioning and debate. Even maybe, especially when it challenges what society thinks.
Right.
And NEXUS-IBA seems to be kind of picking up that torch, providing a space for individuals and communities to share their ideas, especially in places in the world where traditional media is controlled.
Okay, so it's kind of like they're creating a modern version of that Athenian agora, that public space where Socrates would engage people in these philosophical discussions.
That's a great way to think about it, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, think about IPA. It lets anyone broadcast their thoughts and perspectives.
Really?
There's no gatekeepers. There's no restrictions on who can speak. And in a world where so much information is filtered or censored, IPA offers a powerful alternative.
Yeah, that's got to be especially important in countries where freedom of speech isn't a given.
Right.
I mean, it could be a lifeline to the outside world for some people.
It can be.
A way to share their stories and experiences, without fear.
Absolutely. And one of our sources highlights a case where IPR provided a platform for citizen journalists reporting on local corruption in a country with a very repressed regime.
Oh, wow.
And their reports, which would never have gotten out through state-controlled media,
Right,
reached a global audience through IPR, sparking international attention and actually leading to some positive changes.
Wow, that's incredible.
It is.
It shows you the impact these platforms can have.
Yeah, it's not just about abstract ideas. It's about empowering creation.
Empowering people. Yeah, and it kind of makes me think about Socrates' unwavering belief in the power of truth and dialogue, even when he was facing opposition.
Right.
I mean, he was willing to die for his principles.
He was.
And in a way, those who use IPR to speak truth to power are carrying on that legacy.
They are.
Speaking of Socrates, one source describes his trial in 399 BC.
Oh, wow.
And it paints this really vivid picture of this philosopher, this gadfly.
Yeah,
Standing in an Athenian courtroom, defending himself against these charges of corrupting the youth and impiety.
Wow. And what's interesting is that those charges came about because Socrates was so committed to questioning everything, challenging authority, and encouraging young people to think for themselves.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if the powers that be in ancient Athens felt threatened by his ideas.
It's possible.
By his ability to make people question the accepted norms.
Yeah, and it reminds us that the struggle for free speech has been going on for centuries.
For centuries.
The players might be different, but that underlying tension between those who want to control information and those who believe in a flow of ideas, it's still there.
Yeah, okay, so we've got this link between Socrates and NEXUS-IBA, but let's get down to brass tack. How does NEXUS-IBA deal with fake news and disinformation?
That's the question, isn't it?
I mean, it seems a platform like IPR with its open door policy could be a breeding ground for that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a valid concern, and it's something that NEXUS-IBA takes serious. They don't just open the doors and let chaos happen.
Right.
Instead, they focus on empowering their broadcasters to be responsible and discerning. They offer training on media ethics, fact-checking, and responsible.
So it's not just about giving people a voice, it's about helping them use that voice responsibly.
Exactly. They promote the idea that with free speech comes a responsibility, truthful, accurate, and to avoid spreading harm.
That's a delicate balance.
It is, but it's a crucial one.
Yeah, it is. But what about when governments or powerful individuals try to manipulate information for their own gain? We've seen a rise in that kind of activity in recent years, with authoritarian regimes cracking down on dissent and even some democratic governments trying to control the narrative.
Okay.
How does NEXUS-IBA handle that?
Well, that's where things get really.
Okay, I knew you were going to say that.
One of our sources mentions a specific example where a government tried to jam GR's signal because they were broadcasting content that challenged the ruling party's ideology.
Wait, they were trying to block people from listening to gospel music.
Well,
What was so threatening about that?
it wasn't just the music itself. It was that EGR was giving a platform to religious leaders who were critical of the government's policy.
Oh,
And those in power saw that as a threat.
that's pretty chilling.
It is.
It shows how fragile freedom of expression can be.
It does.
Even something as seemingly harmless as religious broadcast
Right.
can become a target when it challenges the status quo.
Exactly. And it really highlights the importance of organizations like NEXUS-IBA that are willing to stand up for the freedoms and push back against silence dissenting voices.
So how do they respond to this jamming attempt?
Right.
Did EGR just give up and go silent?
No, they found ways to get around the jamming,
Right.
using different frequencies and broadcasting methods to make sure that their message continued to reach their listeners.
Wow, that's amazing. It's like a technological cat and mouse game.
It is.
With NEXUS-IBA constantly finding new ways to outmaneuver those who are trying to silence.
Yeah, it shows their ingenuity and determination. They understand that the fight for free speech often requires creative solutions and being willing to adapt.
You know, this whole conversation is reminding me of Plato's allegory of the cave.
Oh.
Remember that one where people are trapped in a cave, only seeing shadows on the wall, mistaking those shadows for reality?
Yeah, and then one person escaped and sees the world as a...
Exactly.
Yeah.
Bathed in sunlight.
Yeah.
It's like NEXUS-IBA, through their platforms like IPR and EGR, is helping people escape that cave of controlled information and experience the world in all its complexity.
It's a powerful image.
Yeah.
And it highlights how transformative free speech can be. When people have access to a lot of different information and perspectives, they
Yeah.
can start to question their assumptions, challenge the status quo, and create a more just world.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive, but there's still a lot more to explore.
Yeah, we've just scratched the surface.
So join us for part 2, where we'll go deeper into the challenges and opportunities of free speech in the digital age,
I'm ready.
and how organizations like NEXUS-IBA are working to ensure that everyone has a chance to escape that cave and embrace the light of truth and understanding.
Sounds good. It's interesting to think about the tools that people who want to control information use.
Yeah.
You know, in ancient Athens, it might have been threats or accusations of impiety, but today it's often about controlling the media.
Right. It's easy to think of censorship as something that only happens in authoritarian regimes.
Right.
But we see attempts to manipulate information and control the narrative even in democratic societies.
Exactly, and that's where NEXUS-IBA becomes even more important.
Yeah.
One of our sources talks about how they're actively working counter media consolidation.
Media consolidation.
Yeah, that trend of fewer and fewer corporations owning more and more media outlets.
That sounds kind of scary.
It is.
Yeah.
If just a handful of companies control the information that people get, it's much easier to shape public opinion and silence dissenting voices.
Yeah, it's like creating a giant echo chamber where certain viewpoints are amplified and others are shut out completely.
Right. And NEXUS-IBA's approach is to support independent media outlets and citizen journalists,
Okay.
giving them the resources and platforms they need to reach a wider audience.
So it's about diversifying the media landscape.
Yes.
Giving people access to a wider range of perspectives and information sources.
That's a key part of it, but it's also about promoting media literacy.
Media literacy.
Yeah, teaching people how to critically evaluate information, identify bias, and recognize those tactics of manipulation.
Okay.
They're basically equipping listeners with tools to be discerning consumers of information, which is, very much in line with Socratic.
Question everything.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about IPR and EGR, which are focused on radio broadcasting.
Right.
But what about digital platforms? How do they fit into all of it?
Well, social media, for example, has become a major battleground for free speech.
Yeah.
With issues like censorship, algorithmic bias, and the spread of disinformation.
Yeah, it's a complex landscape.
It is.
There's no easy answers.
No. On the one hand, digital platforms have the potential to democratize information sharing, giving a voice to those who have been marginalized.
Right.
But on the other hand, they can be easily manipulated to spread propaganda, so discord and silence dissent.
And we've seen that happen.
We have.
With governments and political actors using social media to spread disinformation, influence elections, even incite violence.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Our sources point to several examples where social media platforms have been used to manipulate public opinion and undermine democratic process.
Yeah.
And this raises some serious questions about the role of these platforms in society and the
Yeah.
need for greater transparency and accountability.
So how do we balance the benefits of these platforms with the risks?
Yeah.
It feels like we're always playing catch up,
Right.
trying to deal with the unintended consequences of technologies that are constantly evolving.
It's an ongoing challenge, but I think there are a few key things we can do. First, we need to promote digital literacy.
Okay.
Teaching people how to navigate these platforms safely and responsibly.
So that would include things like recognizing fake news, understanding algorithms,
Right.
being aware of the ways in which information can be manipulated online.
Exactly. Second, we need to hold these platforms accountable for the content they host and the algorithms.
Okay.
This might involve regulations, transparency requirements, or even creating alternative platforms that are designed with ethical considerations in mind.
And third, I think it's important to remember that technology itself isn't the problem.
Right.
It's a tool.
It is.
And like any tool, it can be used for good or for bad. The challenge is making sure these powerful technologies are used to benefit humanity.
Well said. And that brings us back to the core principles of free speech and freedom of...
Yeah.
These freedoms are not just abstract rights. They are essential for a healthy...
Yeah, they allow us to challenge authority, hold those in power accountable, explore different ideas, and ultimately create a world where everyone can reach their full potential.
And just as Socrates was willing to risk his life to defend these principles in ancient Athens, organizations like NEXUS-IBA are carrying on that fight in the modern world.
Yeah.
Using technology to amplify diverse voice and challenge those who would seek to control the narrative.
It's a reminder that the fight for free speech and freedom of religion is never truly over.
It's not.
It requires constant vigilance, courage, and a willingness to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult or dangerous.
Now, before we wrap things up entirely, there's one more fascinating aspect.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's that? Well, lay it on me. What haven't we covered?
Well, we've talked about the negative side, the disinformation and censorship and manipulation.
Right.
But one of our sources highlights something really inspiring.
Go ahead.
Something that really gets at the heart of what both Socrates and NEXUS-IBA about.
Okay, I like inspiring. Tell me more.
It's about the power of dialogue and bridge building.
Okay.
Even across ideological divides. There's this incredible story about a program that aired on IPR where they brought together two religious leaders from totally different faiths.
Okay.
And these were faiths that had a long history of conflict and animosity, even violence between them.
Wow, that sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It was tense at first, for sure, but the format of the program encouraged respectful listening. And
Yeah.
they weren't there to debate or score points, but to share their perspectives, listen to each other's stories, and try to find some common ground.
So it was less about winning an argument and more about understanding each other as human beings.
Exactly. And the result was amazing.
Really?
These two leaders who had basically viewed each other with suspicion and distrust
Yeah.
ended up finding common ground and forging a genuine connection.
Wow.
The program sparked a wider dialogue in their communities, leading to initiatives that promoted cooperation.
That's really powerful.
It is.
It's a great example of how open dialogue, even in the toughest situations, can make a difference.
It reminds me of Socrates' belief in reason and persuasion to overcome prejudice.
Yeah, he was always willing to engage with people who disagreed with him.
Right.
Not to change their minds, but to understand them better.
Exactly.
And see if there was any common ground.
It's about recognizing that even when we have different opinions, we can still learn from each other, find common ground, and build.
So where does that leave us?
Well,
We've looked at the challenges to free speech and freedom of religion in the digital age. But we've also seen how organizations like NEXUS-IBA are pushing back using technology to empower people and encourage open dialogue.
I think the big takeaway here is that the fight for these freedoms is about more than just our right to say what we think.
Okay.
It's about creating a world where everyone feels heard, respected, and valued. It's about fostering empathy, understanding, and a willingness to engage in dialogue even when it's hard.
The big challenge.
It is. But as we've seen from the work of NEXUS-IBA and from Socrates, it's a fight worth having.
And it's a fight we can all take part in.
Right.
By speaking up for what we believe in, by listening to others, and by working to create a world where truth, justice, and understanding can flourish.
Well said.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of free speech, freedom of religion, and the power of open dialogue.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been an amazing journey, and I hope it's inspired you to think critically, engage with the world, and maybe even start some conversations of your own.
Great.
Keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep those voices loud and clear.